Miriam Joy, and welcome to my studio. I would like to introduce the latest Miriam Joy class, and this is the squash blossom necklace. And this is really different than a lot of things we've done. We will be using a mold to make our pieces of the squash blossom and the petals, learn how to do the beading, and just this beautiful gourd. I really like this. I'm very happy with this class. I am going to be teaching it a little bit different than I normally do. I usually do one and then do the next one so I know how, but I wanted you to see how I do my thought process and walk it through. What I change, what I don't change, and if it's okay to change things. So it really kind of gives you an insight to my head, I don't know, just to see how things are done differently when putting a gourd together. The first thing we want to do is kind of find a gourd that goes with our design, and I want something that has a little bit of weight, whether you're using a martin, a kettle, or anything like that, and that kind of slopes up because we want the beads and everything on. The first thing we're going to do is get out our circle templates to cut our gourd, and I had one earlier, but I think it was a little bit too big, and I'm going to show you how I make them come down. We want to put that where we want it in the back, and then we're going to simply pull it in the front. But before we do that, we want to look at our gourd and see the shape. See how it's shorter here in the back and it's fatter here in the front. Right about here looks really even to me, or right over either spot like that looks really good. Maybe kind of in the middle will end up. So I want to take my gourd circle, one that's kind of similar to the size opening that I want. I want to hold it up in the back, and I want to pull it down in the front, and that gives me that shape that I'm looking for. And if I do this right, I usually can hold it with one finger while I kind of trace it with my white charcoal pencil, and we get that V kind of look where it's coming down. Now make sure it looks even on both sides. That looks really good. I had done the next size up and it came way down to here, and I think that is too much for what we want, because we want our squash blossom right about there. So I really think that is nice, and I want to kind of look at the back again and make sure that looks good, and then we're going to start to cut it. To get our cutting done, I like to just use my regular jigsaw. People are just amazed what I can do with an old jigsaw. Thrift store, best kind, because they're made to last. But if you're using one of the new gourd saws and you like that, that's fine. There's no issue with that. I am going to go ahead and get my gourd ready. I'm going to do it in the back where it won't be seen, where I can put my blade into. I kind of cut a section and then do a section above that and pop that out. So as long as your blade fits in, you can go ahead and start. You want to keep that tension constant when you're going, because you don't want it to kick back on you. So that's one thing that you should kind of be aware of when you're working. See if we can get our blade in there. I think it's gonna need some more work. And we want to wear an N95 rated mask. That's real important, because of your mold and everything that's working with cutting, sanding, carving, burning. And I also put cotton balls in my ears because I have issues where my ears bother me. So if your ears ever bother you, that's what you need to do. That's something to know. Let's see if we can get that in there nice and tight. I'm using just garden gloves. They're rubber. I can hold on to the gourd nice and tight. I would normally have this down in my hands, or excuse me, on my lap cutting it, but we're up above our table, so go ahead and get it done. But it helps if we plug it in. And then you want to just start nice pressure on that. It's going to get noisy as we're going here. Try to line those up as evenly as you can. Okay, that went really well. Now you're going to clean out the inside of your gourd, get that nice and clean. However, you do that by hand or with one of the cleaning balls or whatever you want to use. And then we're going to sand our rim here just a little bit. But we'll clean it out and we'll come back. So I just cleaned mine out with a little gourd cleaner. Since I'm only doing one and it didn't take that long, it's nice and loose. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sand it. I'm going to do this outside. The one thing I kind of want to do, if you can see, this is at an angle a little bit here, where this is more flat on. I'm going to angle this just a tad, and you do not want to take it very much. You do not want it too low because we're going to put beads in there and we don't want any of that breaking. You want to make sure that your gourd's thick enough, but we don't want it too thick. A thick gourd is not great for this. But we want to make sure that that opening that you also cut is big enough that you can get your sewing materials in and out of your gourd easily. You don't want it to have so small that you're having issues with that. So that's something to think about when you're doing your gourd. I also did a couple of patches, and I'm just going to touch up with the sander with my quick wood. And then once I'm done sanding that, I'm going to take it out and I am going to spray paint it with my spray paint that I pick up from Walmart for 98 cents or under $1 usually. They have the black and the white that they do that way, and I do most of my gourds with the black spray paint. There's a couple of reasons for that. Black is a great dissolve color. You don't see it. It lets everything else show and be highlighted. So that's the reason that I do that. And then I'm careful with paint, especially in a gourd this thin, especially if it was raised in Arizona. It gets in the cracks and makes them expand and you crack your gourd. So if you've ever wondered why that's happening, if you did that and you painted it and used a little bit more water with it, you will crack your gourd. And spray painting it is so much faster anyway. It's just easy to do that way. I'm going to use my gloves, of course, when I spray paint it to keep the paint off my hands, and just one nice good coat, and then just so the smell is gone, you can look and see if you need to do another coat, but that should go fairly quickly. So I cleaned this all out. I just used my simple gourd cleaner since I was only doing the one and it was easy enough to do, fast enough. The next thing I'm going to do is sand it. You can have a gourd sander. I like my little mouse because I have the point and I can get into the ends. I'm going to sand this edge up here and get that nice and smooth. But see how this one's at an angle and this one is more straight? I want to angle this just a little bit. You don't want to do it too much because when we drill our holes for the beads, you don't want it to not have anything to hold on to. For this method, we want to make sure that our gourd is thick enough but thin enough. You don't want one that's going to break real easy, but you do not want a thick gourd because then you're going through a lot of gourd to get the hole punched, and that's not as fun. So you also want to make sure that you have the right size hole that you can get your hand in and out of to sew the beads on as we go. So make sure that you can do that fairly easy. And one of the things I do is before I spray paint it, I dust it off, I blow it off. If you have an air compressor, that's great. If you need to use canned air, that just really cleans it out really, really well. And you'd be surprised how much muck, when you think it's clean, is still in there. And another thing that I did is I went and bought a electric pump for blow-up beds when you're camping, and I use that. That's real easy. I just plug it in and then charge it, and then I have it to blow for quite a while. So that's up to you. And then after I finish sanding it, I'm going to just spray paint it. And I am just using a black spray paint that I pick up for Walmart. You do the black and the white for under $1, and you can't beat that. And the black is a dissolving color, and so it fades into the background. That's one of the reasons that I like to use it. The spray paint is fast. I use my gloves just to get it done. One nice good coat. If you need to touch it up, you can touch it up again, and we'll talk about the edges when you're done. You don't want to necessarily pull that over and spray the edges, because you'll get spray. If you do, just hit it with your Mr. Clean magic eraser, scrub it off, it will come off. The reason that I use the spray paint and not acrylic is you usually have to water it down just a bit, and especially one that's a little bit thinner, especially if it's been raised where it's really hot and dry, they can get down into the veins of the gourd, and it will crack your gourd. So if you've ever painted it and wonder why it cracked, that is the reason. So that's kind of why I spray paint. So we're going to get that all done, and then we should be ready to get going. So you can see I have a boo-boo. I hit that with my spray paint. This is my Mr. Clean magic eraser or art eraser, and voila. Now what you can do, like this guy, you should have your edges, it shouldn't be real sharp like that. We're going to use a little bit of acrylic paint, paint that black and let that dry. But that is how you clean that up if you happen to overspray onto the front of your gourd. So after we spray painted this, we want to make sure that we get our edges clean, and they really should be a little bit not painted on the very edge. And we're just going to come up with some acrylic paint. It does not matter which brush you use. It does not matter which acrylic paint you use. And we're just going to clean up those edges so we have a nice clean edge. I was going to go with alcohol inks and do a yellow, orange, and red, kind of do an ombre effect. But I think I'm going to do a solid color and do acrylic and sponging. I think that's kind of underrated a lot, and I really like it for my backgrounds, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do just a bright red, fire engine red, fire red, any of those type of reds, and we're going to just put a coat of paint on our gourd. You might need a couple. We'll have to wait and see when we get there, but go ahead and paint your gourd, and if you can see through it, go ahead and do a couple coats on it, and we'll get that all nice and done. So I put 2 layers on here. You can still see through the paint, but the paint is not spotty. And we're going to do so many layers on top that that's all I am going to worry about. So I'm going to take a sea sponge, and I want to show you the difference in sea sponges here. This one kind of will give you, well, let's just show you. More blotty background kind of looking, where this one is going to give you more of a fern looking background. And I'm going to be using like a barn red, a dark red, I got Sonoma wine, but any of a deeper red that goes good is fine. Actually, that looks pretty purple. Just put 2 colors down here and see which one I like best. Let's go for the purple. What the heck? But a lot of people, I guess, don't sponge right. The first thing we want to do is dip it into our water and squeeze all the water out of it that you can. We don't want any water left in it. But we need that so all that paint doesn't get sucked in there and it comes out nicely. But if you leave water in it, it comes out kind of liquidy, like a water that you've added water to the paint, and you don't want that. So when you're doing this, the number one thing that people do is they pounce in their paint. And you don't want to do that. You want to take your paint, you want to pull it to the side and then pounce. And you can see how we're starting to get the different texture there. That's really, really important. That way you don't get a blob of color. I always start on the bottom of my gourd. So if you want to change anything, come back, make it lighter, or you didn't like it, you can do so at this time. That doesn't leave you kind of stuck with just that you see. And you don't have to worry about going back and repainting it. Another thing I'm kind of doing is you kind of want to turn your sponge as you're going. That changes your texture. You don't have the same pattern. We don't want to have something that looked like it came off the press and just done one direction. We want to keep it kind of moving. Also make sure that you're keeping the same amount of color, that if you start to run out, you go back and redo it so you don't have one side that's more heavy colored with texture than the other side. Now remember, we're going to put a couple of more coats on here, and I probably have a little bit more than I normally would do, but we're having fun there, so I kept on going. So I'm going to finish up with my dark red, candy bar, barn red, any of those reds that look good. It doesn't matter. Don't be so picky and worried about things like that. If it looks good with the red, go for it. After we get this done, we're going to come back with our pumpkin. So that dries pretty fast. You don't usually have to wait very long for it at all. And then I'm going to go to pumpkin. And jack-o'-lantern, pumpkin, any of those are pretty self-explanatory. And I like this color as a highlight for the red. It really brings it out. Again, I'm going to start on the bottom and work my way to the top. And we're just going to apply it. Maybe not as much as we did the last one, but we're just going to go ahead and do that all over the entire gourd. Okay, that looks really good as is. I don't know, I'm going to play and see if I want a turquoise. Turquoise color, Laguna, turquoise, whatever. And actually, this is really good for you to see kind of my work through process. I may not end up doing this color. So we are going to see. Again, I have rinsed out my sponge, squeezed it all the way out. We're going to pull some paint and pounce back into it. You can use disposable paints, you can use plates, or you can use, I also used plastic ones and just reuse them all the time. That's what I usually do. I thought we were just going to do black on this guy, and I kind of changed my mind. So I think that looks good. I don't want a lot on this. I'm going to try and do just a little bit here and there, but I do like the turquoise. I think it'll help pick up the necklace when we get to going here. So this is a personal opinion. You don't have to do this. Some other colors that are really good with this, but since we're working with the silver, I might not use, or gold, bronze, things like that. If you were doing the blues, you could pull in the silvers, but we're going to stay away from the metallic colors today, I think, and just work with the basic acrylic paints more than that. So I am just going to continue this till I get enough on there that I think I'm good. And the one thing I'm going to come back and do is come and clean this up with my black acrylic. I should have really waited and painted it on at that time, but I really thought at that point I was going to use the alcohol inks, and that's why I did it there. Otherwise, you would do it at this time and it just cleans everything up, and then we'll spray varnish it or hand varnish it before we start our beading and our work onto it. Okay, we've got this done. I did not varnish it. I forgot that we want to put our quick wood on and everything before we varnish it, so that's something we want to think about. We want to take a look at our mold and see kind of where that's going to line up. We want to get this part kind of in the middle here and think about how we want to do our beads from there, but we're going to get this guy on first. And I kind of have an idea where I want them to go and how we want them to do. So we're going to try and aim for kind of right there in the middle. You can always take this off and don't worry about it if you are not able to get it the first time. We're going to be using quick wood. Quick wood is a 2-part epoxy wood putty that we do carry at miriamjoy.com. I'm going to be using vegetable oil. Yes, you can also use Pam. That's one thing I get asked a lot. And because we're going to pop it out, we're also going to spray it inside of our mold. And I'm going to go ahead and do both of the molds because I've got the spray. And get those all down in those corners. Now the wood putty, we talked about it being 2 parts. They're measured out equally. We have the tan and the white, and this is a small amount. It's probably smaller than I think, and I usually end up cutting up too much, but we'll see. Pop it back in, cover it back up. That helps keep it fresh. You don't really need to put it back in there, but if you were done with it, put it back in there to keep it good for next time. It has a plastic piece around it. People always forget about that. I get people all the time will say, what am I doing wrong? I said, you forgot to take the plastic piece out. So don't take it off until you're using that part to keep it fresh, but don't forget to take it off when you do. So we're kneading, getting through the marble, getting through all of that color. And we're just going to keep on going here. I do really like our background of our gourd. It also turns warm to the touch, kind of. And when we're working with a mold like this, we're going to kind of get it start to go in the direction that we want it to go. And we're going to push it, and you see we've got more than plenty, I think, here by the time we work it down, get it into all those little cracks and corners. And when I start to work on a mold, you will see me slide it, and that's how I get it all in kind of nice and neat. So we're sliding it kind of. You want to make sure that your hands or have vegetable oil on them. Make sure you've removed your jewelry. Quick wood dries rock hard in an hour. It has about 20 minutes workable time, but that includes your jewelry. I know I've got my other rings on, but they've been in quick wood quite a bit, so I'm not worried about them. So you can see how we've got that pretty good. You want to make sure that you don't have any overlaying, or that will come out on your gourd. We've got a little bit too much on that side. So I've left this guy in here about 20 minutes. And he's still a little bit flexible. He's really got this nice shape versus trying to put it on by hand. And we've tried both ways here, and this looks really good. So I am going to go ahead and put him on with the E6000. I may need to put a little bit of painter's tape to hold him in place for about 30 minutes till he gets nice and secure. So we want to make sure that we've got him on really well and get rid of all the little tails that are coming around here. And I want to make sure I've got him straight on my gourd as well. And I'm going to push him a little bit. I don't want to push him too hard on the designs, but he's dry enough that he should hold that form really well. And you want to make sure you've got the ball points down and of course a necklace part down, but you want it nice and straight. And I don't think I'm going to have to tape it. I think that's going to dry well enough. And so I was looking at the other ones and on our petals that we're going to put up the sides, and I'm going to do those and bring those out about every 20 minutes. And see, this one is still pliable as well. If you're comfortable putting it on and you want that exact shape, go ahead and do that. Just test your beads to make sure that you have those as far or as close as you want before you glue that on, and just continue to work these. Or if you want to just kind of get their shape and put them on once they're dry, or if it's more flat and you're not worried about it drying as much, they'll be easier to paint off the gourd than on the gourd. So that is something to think about. Unfortunately, this guy, I did want to have him on because I think his shape will matter more than the smaller petals will. So that was my thought and reasoning behind that, but do what works for you. To cut just small enough sections, so that's going to be a little bit tough there. Make sure I get them big enough but not too small, and we're going to work this really well. I think that'll be straight enough that we can put them on with quick wood or E6000. We'll take a look at that. And I've got this all nice and kneaded here. And the same with my mold. Wipe off some of this that's too much. And don't worry about if you don't have, or you'd have too much, take it. I usually try to have a piece of wax paper and put it between a plastic baggie, something like that, to save it for the next go around. We actually might even be able to do 2 out of that. I thought it was being so good with just 1, but it is more than it looks. And you can see how I'm sliding with my thumb, getting that extra off. None of it should be up above. Okay, all of that should be inside that mold. It should be looking good. So I went ahead and I made 10 of these, so I have a couple extra just in case I need to fill it out more. I'd rather have too many than not enough, and I was leaving them 20 to 30 minutes. It kind of depends on heat, cold, humidity, everything like that as well, before I was kind of popping those out. And that way you get a nice clean mold. Some molds you can work more with others. This one, obviously, just leaving it in is the best way to do it. And we decided that even if your gourd was curved and it stands out, that makes it what it would do on your neckline and more realistic. So we have all of those done. I have a couple that I had extra that I had tried to do when we were popping them out, and I am going to show you 2 different ways to paint them, and then you can decide which way you would like to do it, what you have the supplies for, which you like better, which is easiest, so on and so forth. Both of these ways, we're going to start with black, and you can also use a dark brown. This is going to be our shadowing, basically, of our turquoise, the dark, deep areas. I'm going to try not to paint the stone. If I get it on there, that's okay. We're going to come back and clean all that up later. It doesn't matter. I'm just using black acrylic paint, any brand. And we're just getting a base down for these. And I'm going to go ahead and paint the black. I probably should do it in silver because we want... if any of that showed, we'd want to see it painted, not left naked. So there is one. And here is 2. And this just really helps it look more realistic, shows you shadowing the dark areas of your piece. And especially like around this edge of the stone, we want that black. See if I can do it without having to pour more paint. And then my next layer is going to be my turquoise color. Again, we discussed the turquoise and what colors and stuff like that, because I'm going to need a few layers of that. And we're going to do some stuff to make it look more like a stone instead of just being painted like the plastic pieces I used to make. So we're just going to get a layer on there. If you go over on the black, over that edge, don't worry about it. We can come back later and repaint over the top of it. It's not a big deal. I'm just trying to get a base on here that we can start building for, start to get that turquoise layer. And if we needed to put a white coat underneath it, we could do that as well. But your quick wood should kind of act as that white coat. So we got those 2 drying. They already look really a lot better. One of the methods I'm going to teach you is just using acrylic paint. Just any of the metallic acrylic paints. The metallic gives it that metallic look, of course. And all we're going to do is take a brush and we're going to kind of just go over, it's almost a dry brushing but not quite. We want to kind of leave the black showing through, so we're just kind of roughly painting that. And this does not need to be a pretty job, it just needs to be done. And because the more you are careful about it, the more unrealistic it's probably going to be. If you've ever had a squash blossom, they're all individually handmade. Each petal is different of the other petals. So if you have 2 of these petals and they don't match exactly, well, then it's handmade. And this is our bell, and we want to leave that black kind of sitting in the back. And I'm just going to do this silver real quick here. And if you think it needs another coat, if you don't, you don't. But you can see how much of that is already showing through and how good that looks in the dark kind of highlights. We'll come back in a while. Well, let's do it now. We're working on that. Let's do it now and get this line around the edge in nice and neat. So that looks good. I'm just using a small little liner here. I may have to go to a bigger one. adding just a tad of water to it. And I'm just going to try and get that line right around there. And we're just going to go all the way around the stone. Sometimes the hardest thing is keeping your fingers still, but that really cleans that stone up. Makes it look nice and neat. So when we go back to base coating that, we want to try and not get it on here. If we do, just go back over it. You may find that you want to do it after the stone is completely painted. That's fine too. Again, there's no right or wrong. And I'm going to set these up in a line, all 10 of mine, once I figure out which way I'm going to paint them. And just do them assembly style, and that way they'll really go nice and fast. So that's with our acrylic paint, except for the stone. We're doing the stone the same way on both of these. I'm going to put another layer on our stone here. See if we can start to get that built up. And I want to keep it off the nice, clean, fresh side that I just painted if we can. Yeah, it looks good. There's all kinds of ways you can make necklaces and stuff using this method. I've used them using the conchos. I'll show you later on how that looks. It's a fast, easy, inexpensive way to do a necklace. Okay, so we got another layer on those. The next method I use is the Inca Gold, and I really like the Inca Gold. It is wax based, so it rubs on, but you have to be careful with it. If you put your fingers in it, it likes to get mold in it really easy. Of course, it's wet and dark and dry, so it's better to get some out of it and not have to worry about the mold. I've got some Q-tips here, and let's get just a little bit out, or just rub it on there and not worry about it. Just keep your lid, especially as hot as it is this summer, right on there. Now, if you wanted to put it on your finger, rub it on with your finger, which is my preferred method. But today, since it's such a little area, I'm just going to use a Q-tip, and we're just going to come in and rub the areas that we can get to, and it keeps the other areas darker, which I really like. You're not having to worry about getting them in there. If you ever have these and they do dry out, I do have a video because I cried when mine dried out. You can revitalize them. So it needs just a tad bit more added to it, in fact. But I knew there had to be a way. Okay, so see how that's kind of already looking. Now another thing I do to this one, because it's kind of sticky and I want to get that real polished silver look, is I'm going to actually use some pigment powder. This is Pearl X. This you can find in your scrapbook section at your local craft store. Blue Whale Arts would also carry it if you probably wanted a single color. And I am just using the silver, but you also could kind of use like a white highlight just to set that off even more so. There we go, there's that brush. I keep a brush just special for these. I always dip it in here and then dip it on the lid, because there's a whole bunch in there and you don't want all of that going to your piece. It's just a waste. So remember that when you go to do that. So I'm just going to come in here and just put that powder on the top. I don't know if it is worth the extra effort or not. I think I really like it better with it. That's going to be your choice. So now we're going to talk about the stones. We want to make them kind of a little bit more realistic looking. If you've got some silver on there, it may look like you did it on purpose, so leave it. That is up to you. But what I do is I come up with this tiniest bit of white. You can see my little white puddle over here. I've hardly used any paints on these stones at all. And I'm just going to put it in just enough to get some white, but not too much. We're going to pounce that off as much as we can. So we're just going to come over to our stone and we're going to pounce some white off. And you can lift some of that back off with your finger. I'll wet my finger down just a little bit to pick up a little bit of that back up. But you don't want much at all. It's just a tiny amount. So think about just basically a highlight more so than even a white part in the stone. If you find turquoise with white in it, it's probably magnesite. Alright, so now we're going to put some little tiny lines here and there in black just to give it that rock feel. If you've got really good turquoise, you don't have any of this in it. It's just one solid color. But most of us don't have that good of turquoise. And you can see how tiny those lines are. And we're just doing a tiny little bit of liner work on them. Not much. And you want to make sure that you're not doing the same direction, the same thing on the stones, so they're all identical. The stones would not be identical. So there is the two methods to do these little guys with. These would also just make really pretty earrings just by themselves. They would be really cute to do. And I'm just cleaning up around the edge any of that I may have got with another color or anything, but you can see how stone-like they really look, and you can't really tell too much of a difference. This one's a little bit shinier. And I'm going to go ahead and do all 10 of mine, and we will take it from there. If you have any quick wood pieces that you need to touch up, just come in and sand them down till you get them where you want them. When you're doing the bell, put the quick wood back in and don't spread it out so far in the back, and then the bell will give the bell a better shape. But you can come in, and if you have any quick wood that you don't like where it is, or it's not supposed to be where it is, you can simply just kind of sand that area off, and just know that you have that ability to do that. Anything you can do to wood, you can do to quick wood, and touch any of these up that you have a part where you don't want it. I went ahead and finished all 10 of mine, and I'm really happy with those. I think those look really good. So now we want to work on our horseshoe part of our squash blossom, and we're going to paint some of it black. And it doesn't need to be the whole thing like the other, but where the deep creases are. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this little guy right here. What this is a place where I folded the clay and I didn't get it smoothed back out. And if you put it in and it looks like that, that's why I like it. I think it kind of adds to the antiqueness of it, like that new word. And so I'm going to paint him black in just those areas, and then we're going to do the silver. I think I'm going to try and come in along the edges around this guy, and if you get it on the gourd, just get your brush and clean it and a little bit of water and wipe it down or if there's some that you can do with a Q-tip, use your Q-tip. Don't worry about it if it happens. And I use my gourd to stabilize my fingers so I have a more stable stroke, I guess would be the word I'm looking for. But because of the shaking and everything, it's not always fun. We know when we get a little bit older, we get a little bit shakier. So, I'm going to do this guy and work in those real deep parts. Make sure you have those. And I was looking at this hole here, and I wondered if it was deep enough that we could actually put a needle or a bead reamer or a needle through and get all the beads to go through that. That would be kind of interesting, I think. So I am going to try and get as close as I can. If you were able to get it painted before you put it on, you thought you wanted to do it that way, go ahead and do it that way. I just think that I want this piece at least contoured to the gourd shape. My husband always talked about doing one on each side of that as well. So that's another thing to think about. So I'm just going to finish painting in these grooves, and then I'm going to paint the edges around, which would be the shadow areas, and then we'll apply our silver. I used my liner brush to come in and get these little tiny areas that I couldn't get otherwise around the edges, and I went ahead and did the whole thing black because by the time I got done it was almost all done anyway. So any little holes that you need to kind of pop in there, you can do that. Once we get that dry, I've been using a little kind of old scruffy brush to put my Inca Gold on with instead of the Q-tip. That just worked better for me. See how we can get a little bit more control. We do not have any turquoise in here, so it's all silver. So kind of keep that in mind, that this is all going to be silver. Video we did differently. I just kind of wanted you to see the thought process behind me creating, because usually I do one, figure it all out, and then do the video. But I think it would really be interesting to some of you to see how I kind of work that out, what I try, what I don't try, all of those kind of things. So we want to get down here as far as we can on the edge, and that just make that silver great. Or the necklace, it just kind of gives it that antique-y feel, almost not a new necklace feel. They haven't been wearing it, they need to get it out and wear it. That keeps it silver. My father was actually a silversmith as well as a teacher. He paid a trip across the United States with his jewelry. We'd sell it at rest areas, and we went to visit my oldest sister, who and her husband were stationed in Florida. And he was able to finance the whole trip, and he did silversmithing till the doctor told him he couldn't do silversmithing anymore. It was too hard on his lungs. Now, if you think it needs any more, then go ahead and add a little bit more. But I am going to come in here now with my pigment powder. I'm going to try and keep it off of the rest of my gourd. Be a little bit pickier about where that goes. Again, tap it off in the lid. I don't want a whole bunch. I don't want it spilling off onto the gourd like that. And you start to get that there, so I'll work on cleaning that up a little bit later. Now, if you didn't use a pigment powder, you could use a brush on varnish. But with the pigment powder, at least that area you would want to spray varnish. You could hand varnish the rest of it if you wanted to do that for some crazy reason. Alright, now I wanted to kind of just show you, if you think that you needed any more detail, you can always come back and put it in. So I'm taking my brush, picking up some black, and I always roll or twist that off. You don't want too much water. It gets too watery down. You want it like an ink consistency. And I want to just get a little back in here. You'll see that kind of pop a little bit better. But if you feel that it doesn't have enough high and low lights, if you've lost some that you want to put back in, just simply add them back in with the black. I want to keep it off the top. And I want those guys a little darker. You could even come back in between those lines if you feel that they are not farther enough away, or excuse me, deep enough, black enough. So just hit them with that if you think that you need those darker areas to give that more depth and help separate those a little bit. But that is totally if you think it needs it. If you don't do it.